Good morning and a very warm welcome to this session supporting the energy transition in buildings. Welcome to our participants. I see that the numbers of the participants is still growing a bit, so I'm trying to speak rather slowly in order to allow for participants to move over from other sessions. I see that we've lost the background slide. But I imagine this is probably to move over to the first PowerPoint. Again, welcome to the participants. Very warm welcome also to our speakers. Many of you have certainly seen the plenary session this morning and probably also been part of some of the previous breakout sessions. So you had a dense morning already. This is now the last round of the parallel sessions, but devoted and dedicated to a very central theme within the Clean Energy Transition Program. Now, let me introduce myself quickly. My name is Anette. I'm the head of sector within the Clean Energy Transition team in CINEA, and I will have the honor of chairing this session. The session will focus on three funding topics, and which all have in common that they support you. They support you in the wish to move forward to improve and accelerate the energy performance of our buildings, which is one of the absolute centric areas of work under the program, but so imagine so of your own work. Let me first explain the menu that we prepared for you. First, we will have a presentation on the European policy context, but more important is the legislative context obviously is evolving very continuously, but also very rapidly these days, and probably sadly it needing to evolve under the current pressure under the energy security considerations. Then we will move to our three funding topics. We will address first the policy layer, how to support key legislation in this frame of this call 21, and notably the building directive. We will then move to a broader topic on how to support deep renovation, zero emission building stock. And then we will move to a third zoomed in topic, if you wish, on very major instruments under the building energy efficiency policy tools, where we will be looking at energy performance certificates and smart readiness for buildings. Let me shortly introduce our dear panel of this morning. If you would like to shortly just put on your video, we will have with us from DG Energy, Anette Pearson. She is Policy Officer in the Building and Product Unit in DG Energy. And then, of course, we have our colleagues here from our Clean Energy Transition team. We will have Ulrike Nuscheler with us. We will have Bagues and our colleague Pierre-Antoine. So thank you very much again for being with us. In terms of your questions, you are invited to post your questions into the chat at any time of the session. We'll try to respond to them as we go along. Technically speaking, there's no certainty that we can actually see the questions after the recording is taken. So what we will do, even if we do respond to the questions in writing, we will shortly read them out at a good part at the end of the session, so that we can make sure that they're actually also really integral part of the recording, which of course you can access at any time later, but of course other participants may access them at any time later. So we'll take the questions at the end of the session in order to allow for a good, seamless rolling of the session and the best use of our time. I think this was all in terms of the housekeeping, and on that, I would suggest that we start directly with our session. We'll first have the pleasure of getting an overview of the policy context under development as we so speak nearly. And we are very glad to welcome Anette, as I said, Policy Officer of DG Energy. Anette, the floor is yours. And I hope that we could have the slides correspondingly. Thank you.
Many thanks, Anette, and Welcome and good morning to all participants. So my name is Anette. I'm a policy officer at DG Energy at the unit dealing with energy efficiency in buildings and products. So I would like to give you a brief policy context so we can move to the next slide. Because I would like to start with the most recent events, which is the adoption 2 days ago of the EU Repower EU plan, which has the specific purpose to rapidly reduce the dependence on Russian fossil fuels, and also really to make sure that we accelerate the green transition, because with the tragic events we have seen recently, there is the opportunity to use what is already in the toolbox, but also to strengthen and implement it faster. So this package includes a full set of components. One of them is an EU Save plan, which is a plan to save energy in the short, medium, and long term. And it is also about increasing the production of renewable energy with specific purpose proposals on permitting, speeding up the permitting procedures, and also about diversifying the energy supply. And it will be backed by financial measures, which will be sort of a new leg to the Recover EU plan. And we can move to the next slide, so I can give you a few examples of what is in this plan. So what you will see is a strong focus on solar, because within the solar strategy, there is also the proposal to really increase the uptake of solar on buildings, be it new buildings or existing buildings, to make sure that the new buildings are solar ready and to make sure that the potential for solar is being exploited in all existing buildings. And this is a measure where, for instance, there is a proposal to add a new article to the EPBD proposal, which was adopted by the Commission in December last year. So this is also translating into regulatory proposals. And of course, energy efficiency and energy savings is really, really key to reduce the dependence of fossil fuels. And this is why it is also accompanied by a proposal to raise the energy efficiency target, which was proposed for 9%, and now the proposal is to raise it to 13%. And this then comes together with all the other aspects, which I mentioned earlier about speeding up renewables and also diversifying gas supplies. So we can move to the next slide, please. And a lot of this is, as I said, this is a way of really speeding up the implementation of the European Green Deal. And as you are probably all well aware, buildings do play a big role in the European Green Deal. And this is, of course, because the buildings are big energy consumers and they are to a very large degree supplied with fossil fuels. And the rate of renovation is low, and the opportunity is often not taken to really make the energy efficiency improvements while making a renovation. And if we take the next slide, please. So this is also why the renovation wave, which we can see in the next slide, has a few key objectives, which is the decarbonization of heating and cooling, the tackling of energy poverty and worst performing buildings, and the renovation of public buildings and social infrastructure. And as you might be aware, the renovation wave strategy was adopted in October 2020, and it can be seen really as a way of, at the same time, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, improving energy security, which has come very high on the agenda right now, but also a way of creating jobs. So it's really a win-win-win strategy. And we could go to the next slide, please. And with the renovation wave and the European Green Deal, there is a whole set of legislative proposals and buildings play a key role in many of these proposals. I will talk a little bit more about the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, but there's also the Energy Efficiency Directive, the Renewable Energy Directive, the Social Climate Fund, the proposed expansion of ETS to building and transport sectors, the effort sharing regulation, and all these pieces of legislation need to play together to make homes and buildings fit for a greener future. So next slide, please. So one of the key elements coming from the renovation wave is the revision of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. And this was proposed by the Commission in December last year. And the objectives of the revision is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from buildings by 60% by 2030, reduce final energy consumption by 14%, and energy consumption for heating and cooling by 18%. And coming from the renovation wave, the aim is to double renovation rates. So it is both about contributing to reducing the emissions in the 2030 context, but also very much to make sure that the building stock is fit for the climate neutrality in 2050. So next slide, please. So the focus areas of this revised proposal are renovation, decarbonization, modernization and system integration, and financing. And in the slide, you can see a few examples of the different measures proposed, where of course minimum energy performance standards is a key measure. Zero emission buildings as a standard for new buildings is also a key measure. Also increased use of digital tools and infrastructure for electric vehicles, and strengthened provisions for financing, and also the proposed ban for subsidies to fossil fuels in 2027. And also proposals that there should be no on-site carbon emissions from fossil fuels in buildings. And so this was proposed in December, and the proposal is now with the co-legislators, and they are advancing at a fast speed. So in the council, they have already started discussing all aspects of the proposal, and the parliament will soon present their draft reports. However, we expect that the negotiations will continue for the rest of the year, but at least until the beginning of next year. And this was all from my side. So with this, I leave the floor to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anette, for this very clear presentation, which also conveys not only the evolution of the latest policy developments, but also, of course, the urgent layers through the recent crisis, which are actually faced by all actors at all levels, beyond the actual building agenda. Now, let's move to the next agenda point here. We would introduce to you the first funding topic under clean energy transition for this call 22 in this frame on supporting the energy transitions in buildings. And here we start with a policy layer, how to support key legislation. And I would invite my colleague Ulrike Nuscheler to present this topic to us. Thank you very much. Uli, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot to both Anettes, because it's exactly the introduction that I needed. So I already see the first slide, but maybe we can directly go into the next. So this topic, so towards an effective implementation of key legislation, is as such not new. We already opened it in for the call 2021, and I have to say it was very successful. What is this topic about? This topic responds to the needs of member states and implementing bodies to implement and also contextualize legislation, because they have to introduce policy measures that would take into account their specific needs and conditions, and also need to develop good tools to monitor. And this requires a high level of technical capacity and resources, which they often don't have. So, and this topic is even more relevant than ever, because as you have just heard many times, and as you're well aware, that all this sustainable energy legislation is undergoing a very comprehensive revision just as we speak. So as I said, the topic as such is not new, but what is new is the specific scope for this year, because this year this topic will focus on the implementation of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, so-called Scope C. But note, and this is important, that we have also other policy implementation support under vertical topics, notably for the energy efficiency first principle that's just being treated in a parallel session, and for audits and energy communities and others, but that you can read in the call. Next slide, please. So coming to the scope, if we say supporting the implementation of legislation, this can mean all kinds of actions, and we have listed some actions that would, for example, very well fit the scope. So any enabling of exchange of insights and sharing of best practices within and across member states, actions that provide support, technical advice, and tools for the contextualization and specification of requirements. Then also the scoping, assessing, and modeling of impacts of implementation options and measures, including non-energy impacts, that becomes more and more important. Also any kind of monitoring and evaluation of policy implementation, and very importantly, developing and applying methodologies for more accurately measuring and calculating and accounting for contributions made under specific policy measures and programs. But these are just examples, but you see it's a whole range of actions that would typically provide support to member states. Next slide, please. So for the more, for specifically this year's scope that is open, so scope C, we would want you to address core provision and aspects of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive clearly, and there we would, in particular, those aspects that are subject to change or that will be newly introduced. Now, as you just heard, since the negotiations are ongoing, so it's a bit, it's quite a challenge to anticipate what will be really adopted in the end. Still, we would like you to anticipate those aspects that will come up and build on flexibility into your proposal, that you will be able with these aspects. And a core aspect, of course, would be the minimum energy performance standards that are partly already implemented at national level, by the way. Also national building renovation plans, renovation passports, zero emission buildings, and infrastructure. But again, this is not exhaustive, it's just examples. But you might miss some aspects, important key aspects for building topics. And I'm going to say something about this with the next slide, please. Voila. So for example, anything that's it's about enabling the framework for deep renovation, there you should refer to the vertical topic called Deep Reno. Anything that would support the implementation of energy performance certificates, please refer to the topic Build Reform, and the same applies Build Perform, not Build Reform. The same applies for the Smart Readiness Indicator. Also there, please find actions that could be funded under Build Perform. And then anything that would be implementation of provisions related to heat pumps, please refer to the topic Heat Pumps. So the typical EU contribution would, we would say the Commission expects actions that would match this call for up to EU contribution of 2 million, but as you might have heard already, this is not precluding that you come up with a different budget. So next slide. Very quickly, I don't want to really read out those impacts. You can read them yourself. Typical impacts would be, for example, the more effective implementation of provisions, or the use of appropriate tools and methods, or for example, the accurate calculation and measurement and verification methodologies. But what is more important for me to explain is what we would like you to do is that you don't write descriptive text how your action would contribute to those, but that you translate those impacts into quantifiable actions for your specific action. So we give you some freedom there. Just as an example, for example, if you look at the use of tools, then you could, for example, quantify the number of member states that use the tools that you have developed. So please be creative and try to fill up those impacts with quantified indicators. Next slide. And that's the last one. So we just wanted to give you some examples of relevant ongoing and concluded projects. What is important here to say that this is not content-wise, maybe good examples, but because they partly or mainly refer to ED, but the examples that you find here, like Ansmov, EPAT, but also Odysseum to a smaller degree, they would describe what kind of support actions are thinkable. So because these projects have very, very successfully already supported member states in implementing, in developing and using methodology, in accessing data. So you might get inspired by these projects. And of course, a very, very key reference is the concerted action on the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. And I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Uli, for this very clear and very timed presentation. I think it's really very it's excellent how you've sliced out how this work by addressing the core provisions, really in aspects of the building directive, relates really directly back to the policy context, which Anette had been outlining earlier to us, but also building the bridge into the ongoing legislative work by your word to describe that also proposals need to be future-proofed. Future-proofed meaning that you would wish to take really well account of the evolving agendas, and that topic really allows those stakeholders who take this really from that policy angle, that really allows that space. Now, moving from that level, from the policy angle, strictly speaking, to more market-based, if you wish, technical assistance, but market-based work towards the zero-emission building stock. That is the title of our next agenda point, but also the title of the funding topic, which our colleague Anna Bagues will introduce to us. Anna, thank you very much for being here, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and hello to everybody on the other side of the screen. Indeed, I will be presenting the topic titled Towards a Zero Emission Building Stock, Strengthening the Enabling Framework for Deep Renovation. And if we go directly to my next slide, before going into the content, I would like to remind that the funding rate for this topic is 95% of the eligible costs. The indicative total budget earmarked for the topic is 6 million euro. We consider that a contribution from our side up to 1.75 million per project would allow to address the objectives, although other amounts are possible. And for the consortium, the minimum condition is 3 applicants from 3 different eligible countries. And now let's see what we are looking for with this topic. Next slide. Thanks. As Anette person kindly introduced at the beginning of this session, to achieve our climate goals, there's the ambition to double the current annual renovation rate of buildings by 2030, to increase the level of energy savings delivered by these renovations, so to have a higher share of deep renovation, to walk towards decarbonized building stock by 2050, and to reduce dependence on fossil fuels, where deep renovation can also make a difference, reducing energy demand, especially for heating, but also taking the opportunity to switch to more efficient and renewable-based heating and cooling systems. So in this framework, as we can see in my next slide, the objective of this topic is to foster deep renovation in Europe by addressing obstacles that are present at different levels. So we are proposing 3 different areas of action. The first is the rollout of renovation passports for staged deep renovation. The second is the adaptation of legal, administrative, and funding frameworks, so they are more supportive to deep renovation. And the third area relates to improving the coordination of supply market actors. And I will go into more details for each of them in a bit, but first I would like to stress that proposals can focus only on one of these areas or can also address more than one. But covering everything won't mean that the proposal will be more relevant or better. We want proposals to be focused and effective, to address real problems and needs in their context, and to involve the key actors and to have the results endorsed by them. And now let's dive into the first area of action under the scope of this topic. Thank you. Here, proposals should aim to facilitate the introduction and rollout of renovation passports for staged deep renovation. So when deep renovations cannot be done in one go, for example, due to very high upfront costs, an alternative could be to do it in steps. And this is what we call staged deep renovation. And this needs to be planned very carefully, so the first step does not create lock-in effects for the subsequent ones. And a renovation passport is a tool for this planning. It's a document for the renovation of a specific building that provides a clear roadmap for owners and investors to plan the best scope and timing for the interventions. And the proposal for a recast of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive that Anette mentioned at the beginning provides definitions for all these concepts that I invite you to read, because this will give you an idea of the vision and the ambition expected in terms of energy savings and of energy performance at the end of the renovation process. So once the final stage of the renovation is accomplished. It's important that the solutions and methods proposed for renovation follow the guiding principles of being reliable, so solutions that are proven and available in the market, also cost-effective and affordable. Indoor environmental quality and safety aspects should be integrated as well, and sometimes are even the real drivers or motivation for renovation. And of course, avoid disturbance of occupants as much as possible. Proposals should link and coordinate with any support or funding scheme, one-stop shop or service for renovation existing in the areas or territories addressed, and should also consider the link to the energy performance certificates. And last, the proposal for the recast EPBD advances the introduction for a framework for renovation passports at EU level. But some countries or regions have already taken steps and may have already introduced renovation strategies or recommendations. So the message here is, again, that if something exists, proposals should align with it. And now let's move to the second area under the scope. Thanks. Within this area, proposals should aim to adapt the legal, administrative, and funding frameworks. And with these adaptations, they should remove barriers to building energy renovation in general, and should also facilitate and trigger deep renovation. So the barriers here come from many fronts, and the topic text gives some examples that are common or relatively frequent issues. And this can be related to the legal and regulatory framework. So, for example, the legal status or the decision-making rules in co-ownership, but can also be more technical in relation to permitting rules and procedures, for example, for external insulation. So these are examples that make it difficult or may even prevent renovation at all. Another example is existing support schemes and funding frameworks for energy renovation at regional or national level, where in some cases, mostly light renovations are carried out, and the share of deep renovations undertaken can be very low. So we think there can be still scope to improve these frameworks and the level of ambition delivered. You may have other examples or problems. The list is by no means exhaustive, and you are welcome to tackle those as well. And this links to the next point in the slide. It very much depends on what is in place and what are the issues in the territories where you will be acting. And of course, it's important to involve the relevant public authorities or public bodies so they endorse the proposed changes and help them build a case. So to analyze and estimate the effectiveness and the impact of the changes that they will introduce. Next slide, please. Let's see now the third area of action, where we are looking to improve the coordination of market actors. The construction renovation sector is now highly fragmented, with small actors and companies providing maybe very specific solutions, and they are generally not able to propose a more holistic renovation for optimal energy performance. And considering the level of ambition for the coming years, in terms also of the number and the depth of the renovations to be undertaken, this will need a change, and the sector will need to adapt. And with this area of action, we want precisely to improve the coordination between the actors in the supply side of renovation works. So we are speaking here SMEs, individual craftspeople, different trades working together. And the aim is to help the sector establish partnerships, consortia, collaborations, this can have many names, and deliver long-lasting business models or collaboration models that will enable deep renovation. Proposals should then facilitate this and help looking into how to reduce risks and transaction costs for these companies, how to standardize the contractual liabilities, help them deliver joint quotes, facilitate information sharing, showcasing offers. So these are, again, non-exhaustive examples of possible aspects to address. And again, it's important that actions are well linked to the key actors, well targeted to the context and needs of the market, and to ensure the endorsement by the market, they may involve related actors, like, for example, professional organizations. Next slide. And to finish, let's look into the expectations in terms of impacts. I won't go through them. You have them listed in the topic text, and here in the slide, the presentations will be available. The proposal template also gives some hints on how to explain impacts of your project. So here in this topic, the impacts applicable, of course, depend on the area or areas under the scope that you will address. And you will need to have some indicators as your goals and to estimate and measure your success. And we propose some, but you may have additional ones. You need to look at the impacts during the project and after. And here we are looking to indirect impacts that your actions will trigger, rather than only the impact related to a few renovation works during the projects. So we expect you to create this snowball effect where the impact will continue beyond the project. And regardless of the area chosen, you should, of course, aim to increase the uptake of deep renovation in the territory where you are acting, and to increase primary energy savings, renewable energy generation, and trigger related investments. And next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Well, with this, I finished. That's all, and back to you, Anette. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for this very clear presentation of a dense funding topic, actually, because it really provides for various pathways on all of the important work which needs to be done in view of accelerating and getting better quality into deep renovation. You've mentioned the renovation passport pathway, but also the whole set of work along the different perspective of frameworks in the different layers, but of course the improved coordination of market actors, and which only but reflects, as I said, the density of work which is needed, but also the variety of the pathways which is open for funding support for the work of the different stakeholders who all approach all of these challenges, obviously with their angle, and allows them to work in a very agile fashion. We'll move now to the third funding topic. Thank you very much, Anna. We'll move now to the third funding topic that we'll describe to you this morning. Here we'll look at very specific key instruments of energy efficiency building policy, notably on building performance. We're looking at the energy performance certificates and the smart readiness sector and indicator, sorry. And I'll invite my colleagues Uli and Pierre-Antoine to lead us through this presentation. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
So thanks a lot. So I take the floor because I will start and then hand over to my colleague. Can we have the first slide, please? The first real slide. Okay, super. So as Anette already said, the title of the topic is Energy Performance and Smart Readiness of Buildings, Making the Instruments Work. So this already suggests that we are focusing and looking at two core instruments of buildings policy, namely energy performance certificates and the smart readiness indicators. But we do this individually, but also in an integrated way. So we look how these instruments would work together and how they would work together with even other instruments. So as you just heard by everybody, under the Fit for 55 package, almost all the provisions linked to buildings are being enhanced, and with this also the provisions for energy performance certificates and smart readiness indicator. Just as an example, it's foreseen or it's been proposed to harmonize the energy performance certificates across an A to G scale, and to also link them to minimum energy performance standards, meaning to a kind of renovation obligation. So they will become, if it comes as it's proposed, even more relevant. And also, for example, for the SRI, it's proposed to make it mandatory for larger buildings. So, but while EPCs and SRIs are core elements of buildings policies, there's still many barriers. For example, as concerns the coverage, the information content, and the market uptake of both instruments, which is not satisfactory. Also, the design and the implementation is not at all coherent across member states. The instruments are not perceived as being cost efficient, and also the training and quality control of auditors is not harmonized, and so on. And what are thus the main objectives of this topic? We want to make the instruments more meaningful, more accurate, more user-friendly and trustful, and I think digital technologies will help us with this. We want to help that the methodologies become more robust, so methodologies for calculation and assessment, and also that the access to buildings data is being improved. We want to improve the synergies across the instruments, so namely EPCs and SRIs, but also towards other instruments like the renovation passport. We want to improve the quality of the certification assessment process, and we want to contribute to make the instruments more salient in investment decisions. But these are also just examples. So next slide, please. We are having two scopes, Scope A and Scope B. So we don't only address the different instruments, we also address two different dimensions: the policy implementation dimension, which is Scope A, and the market uptake dimension. So for Scope A, which is called support for member states and the implementing bodies, actions are expected to provide support and technical advice to member states for one of the or more of the following aspects, which I would just quickly read to you. So the contextualization of requirements, which is similar also to the policy topic that you had, but here specifically for EPCs. The ex-ante testing of the approaches so that the design is already fit for the market. Then also an improvement of methodologies to collect and aggregate and analyze the buildings data. Also in view of setting up national databases, which is also proposed to be obligatory. The integration methodological coordination between EPCs and SRIs, specifically for EPCs, the developing of methodologies for the rescaling. I just mentioned it from A to G, and the refining and updating of the methodologies to calculate them. So for the SRI specifically, we look for actions that would help identify implementation paths and help member states to share good practices and experiences. Because as you know, so far it's the SRI is voluntary, and there are a couple of member states who are the pioneers who have started testing it, but so it would be very helpful if member states could share. So now with this, and for Scope B, I hand over to my colleague Pierre-Antoine, please.
Hello, thank you, Uli. So Scope B is pretty much about market uptake of the EPCs and SRIs and synergies between them. So the sort of proposals that we're looking for are proposals that would tackle the integration of SRI to the EPC certification. So through data collection, the use of data sources, certification procedures, and quality check. Also proposals that would seek to develop and test innovative training schemes for EPC or SRI, ideally for integrated EPC SRI joint schemes, and contribute to improve the skills of existing auditors and train more of them. Proposals seeking cost reduction through better data sharing between building audits and inspections, and also possibly between audits for SRI and for EPCs, through by linking different data collection procedures. Proposals that are looking to valorize EPC and SRI potential upgrades and promote them and contribute to their integration to investment decisions in relation to buildings. And finally, we're looking at proposals that would engage stakeholders of the building sector to spread SRIs and improve the EPCs. So, for example, public authorities, the real estate sector, and housing associations. Next slide, please. Thank you. So on the impacts, here again, a long list, but to cut it short, what we are looking for with this topic is more and better EPCs and SRIs of European buildings as a result of the projects, more practical, efficient, and user-friendly design of EPCs and SRIs, more coherence between disclosure tools for buildings, harmonization between member states of policy design and data collection, better methodologies and tools for each instrument and consistent across instruments, better, cheaper, and more transparent building audits, broader and faster EPC and SRI uptake with a greater impact on building value and investment decisions, and of course, primary energy savings, renewable energy generation in buildings, and investment in sustainable energy. Next slide, please. Over to you, Uli.
Okay, thanks. Indeed. Just very briefly, a word on the ongoing initiatives that you should take into account. I won't go into the detail, but you see that there are several projects that, for example, aim to improve the design and the coherence of EPCs, so certainly relevant if you want to deal with EPCs. But then there's also the EU Building Stock Observatory, which is operated by the Commission, that is soon to be relaunched, and which is supposed to be also fed by EPC data. So that is a key initiative which is very important. Of course, and it's not mentioned on the slide, the concerted action for the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive is very relevant. So these are just examples. There's plenty of other stuff outside there. So just that you have an idea where to start. And what we cannot put on the slide, but what you should have in mind as well, is that we're in the process of concluding I have strange pop-ups here, that we're in the process of concluding projects specifically on the SRI coming out of the last call. So they come too late to be really completely taken into account by you, but you should know that there will be already normally four projects on the Smart Readiness Indicator upcoming. So next slide, and handing back to Pierre-Antoine.
So just a few notes, a few recommendations on this topic. So first of all, the proposals are expected to focus on one of the two scopes. It is, of course, possible to address both, but then it should be justified because we are looking for focused proposals rather than proposals covering everything. The proposal can address one or more of the aspects listed inside the scope, and the typical EU contribution, so that is up to 2 million euros for this topic. I just want also to stress for this topic what has been stressed for the previous topic, that also here for impacts, proposals will score point if they quantify their impacts and if they base them on solid baselines and if they clearly link it with the project activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ulrike and Pierre-Antoine, for leading us through this presentation. I'm just now looking at the time, I'm looking at the chat, I'm looking at you, dear participants, in case you had any question to any of the presentations that we have heard so far. In the chat, I don't see for the moment any question, but we do have a couple of minutes. So just to read it out loud and to use the time in case the chat is not recorded, there was a very essential practical question on the submission deadline, which is indeed on the 16th of November at 5 o'clock Brussels time in the submission system. I'm just looking whether there is any other question. How many partners should be involved? I think I'll pass this question to one of my co-speakers. Uli, while you have your video still going, would you like to take the question?
Yeah, of course. So there's a minimum. The minimum is 3 participants from 3 EU countries. But that is very tight. And on the other hand, you don't need to just add up participants. So your action needs to fit the action. You shouldn't just add partner. Every partner that you add should have a specific role. And I mean, I don't know for what topic you ask or if it's a general thing. So the bottom line is 3 independent partners from 3 countries. But you would want to broaden that scope. And what is very important for all of us, I think, is that you have market actors involved. So this is not directly your question, but maybe just as a hint for everybody. Did I miss anything?
I think this was very complete. Thank you, Uli. Then we move to another question, which is equally pertinent in terms of the time horizon that we are typically looking at. Can a project be 1 year or 2 to 5 years of duration? I guess that could be answered from different perspectives. So maybe I can invite my colleague Anna. Would you like to respond first? And of course, the colleagues, if you would like to add perspectives, because the time horizon probably depends also very much on the intervention logic and the actual pathway that a project wants to take. But let's take first go with Anna, and then in case a colleague would like to chip in, please feel free to do so.
Thank you. We are not being prescriptive in the terms of the duration of the projects. 1 year would be probably too tight to take up the challenge that we are asking for. But the duration really depends on your activities and what you consider you will need to achieve your objectives.
Thank you, Anna. Maybe as a benchmark, what we could say is that many proposals that we receive do look at about a 3-year type of time horizon. Having said this, as Anna was very correctly saying, there is no prescription here, really depending on your way of working. Having said this, very long-term oriented projects of the kind of beyond 4 years is actually very rare. It does exist in very specific long-term structural work, but it's rather rare. It gives you as a kind of a benchmark so that you can place yourself with your possible ideas. Just leave a bit of space in case someone would like to formulate another question at this point. If this is not the case, then what I will do while speaking is that I'll type So I've typed the direct functional email address by which you can actually reach out to our team of project advisors. So basically colleagues including Ulrike, Anna, and Pierre-Antoine. But of course, we have a team of about 30 project advisors working on managing this program and in the different themes. And in case you would like to reach out once that you had the opportunity to actually digest the rich material, but also to engage with your market actors, with your with possible peers in crafting a proposal idea, and you need clarification on either the substance of our funding topics, but also clarification on how to submit. Then, of course, our team is happy to be at disposal through this functional email box and will respond to you. The most pertinent questions, which are also of interest to other applicants, will then be transparently published under what we call the frequently asked questions in each of the topic areas on the funding portal, and that allows all of the actors or all of the interested parties basically to have access to the identical information. Thank you very much, Anna. You had the hands freer to be typing this in a more correct fashion. I hope with the capital letters this will work. Thank you very much. If there is no further question, then I would suggest that we close this session. We do hope that we have brought appealing interest of the funding opportunity of the Clean Energy Transition Program in support of the energy transition in buildings, as we said already in the outset, highly centric work to the Clean Energy Transition Program, but also highly centric work within the policy arena, which Anette had been explaining at the outset of this session, and certainly also highly centric work in the arena of your own work, pressing energy and climate commitments from member states, from the European institutions, ambitious, forward-looking negotiations taking place. But there's also a lot of dense, ambitious work being undertaken at all levels, and often really, in traction of the policy agenda at the local level, at the region level, at the member states level. And this program is basically honoring this work, if I can put it this way, by offering opportunities to you. The agendas are ambitious, and therefore we're looking forward to, I'm using Uli's word, to future-proofed and ambitious proposals, but also engaging proposals which really change the fundamentals of how the markets work and give solidity in all of the policy agendas that we really are so convincingly engaged in, and hoping to find peers with you who've been with us this morning. And so I thank you with this very much for your attention. I would like to thank our speakers, Anette, Uli, Anna, Pierre-Antoine, for having presented the topic so clearly and so engaged. I would like to thank you, participants, for your attention. At the other side of the screen, I like this expression of Anna, who was using this. And so we would wish you a very good absorption of all of the material, and as we said, you have our contact points. First of all, of course, all of the repository of all of the information that you need in order to prepare yourself for a proposal. And then, of course, there is a human team behind all of this, and this functional email box will lead you the way to us in case you need further clarifications. With this, again, thank you very much, and I would close the session here with and wishing you all the best for your endeavors. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.